Right. It's a good question. Rabbi Steinsaltz does speak about some connections that some people that we meet in this world, right? It's in the book. Some people that we meet in this world and we feel this very strong connection to them, yet we don't know where it comes from because we never met them before. This could be an indication that those are people that were very dear to us in the previous life. Now, whether we meet them or not, whether God will guide us towards their footsteps, that's unknown. But I'm sure you have people, I have people like that in my life that, you don't know why you feel so close to them, but you do. And that's a sign, no doubt, that our souls were connected. Yeah.
What about memory? In this reincarnation, do people have any conscious memory of their previous life?
It's a question again. I wasn't up there to tell you exactly. I can only base my words on these sources. I will tell you this. Now, Rizal also speaks about this. Yes, we have, very vague memories. But again, that I think depends also on our ability to be in tune with our soul, to listen to that song. And the more in tune we are with that soul, the more that those memories can flow through us. Not just the memories, but also in general, the mission of the soul. And indeed, the purpose of the soul. Not that it's so much connected. I'm reminded of a story of Arik, if I quoted the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but there's a story of Arik Sharon, who came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe once in the 70s. And he was very much in a hurry because he had to catch a flight from JFK back to Israel. And the Rebbe told Ariel Sharon, just stay in the room. Stay, you'll catch the next flight. He missed his flight. The flight that he caught, this is a published story, the flight that he missed, was a flight that was hijacked by Algerian terrorists. On his next visit, he came back to the Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, I have two things to tell you. First of all, thank you for saving my life. But second, there's a complaint that I'd like to file. If you knew that plane was going to be hijacked, why did you save all of the passengers? Why just me? And the Rebbe responded, you think I knew? When I told you to catch your next flight, those were the words that God put in my mouth. And I think the righteous show us how to become in tune with our souls. I think the more in tune we are with our souls, the more God, including those memories, flow through us. And the more we become channels, conduits of that soul and of God's words, of God's purpose for us in this world. Yes?
This era of technology, how do you suggest that we encourage the younger generation to listen to this?
Right. That's a great question. I don't know if everyone ever heard it. If in this era of technology, how would I encourage, or how would we encourage, you probably know more than I do, our younger generation to really become in tune with our soul? I think you need three things. And this also Rabbi Steinsaltz indicated to me in three separate occasions. Number one, I think you need a mentor. Number two, you need times of meditation. Call it prayer, call it unplugging. I know there's a new initiative out there to mimic the Shabbat, a day of unplugging. You need to unplug multiple times a day. And I think what you also need is real connections, real friends, real people that you click with, because they in a way help you uncover that soul. I call them the Michelangelos. Michelangelo, when he carved King David, he said he didn't carve King David out of the stone. The only thing he had to do is reveal him. So those real connections reveal the King David in you. Those are at least three things. I'm sure there's more. Yes?
Part of our prayers have Chiyat Hamechaye.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone through the whole yeshiva system. You don't hear a lot of talk about reincarnation. Why do you think that is?
Chiyat HaMetim or reincarnation?
Both. Just that whole
Right.
idea.
Chiyat HaMetim means the resurrection of the dead that we speak about right when Mashiach will come. Rabbi Steinsaltz actually speaks about it in the book, in the soul, because the ultimate self, he calls it the self. The ultimate self is that marriage between body and soul. We need each other, just like the story you told right from the Talmud. So really the ideal situation for a soul is to be in a body. So we do believe in a resurrection. That's when a person will be able to really complete not just his mission, but the mission of the world, the mission of the souls altogether. But regarding why do you not learn about it in yeshivas, I think that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz was referring to when he said he didn't use the word tragedy, but he bemoaned the fact chaval. You know, it's a pity that people don't teach that. It's true. And Rabbi Steinsaltz, I will tell you this, I had this conversation with him here in New York, but 5-6 years ago, maybe a little more. But he said that the one of the problems is that also then people will go to other religions. When our religion is so rich, so why not teach about the afterlife? Why not teach about resurrection? I want to answer your question because I want to actually emphasize it, strengthen
I
it.
guess it seems like there's a discomfort with it. You know, that's sort of what I think I've always picked up, that they don't want to talk about it because they're not comfortable, and yet these are, you know, learned people.
Right, right. Yeah. But comfort has never been a goal in Judaism. Challenge has, resilience has, and so on, but not comfort. Yes.
I'm a doctor, and I've seen and I've had stories related to me of patients who've had, let's say, really serious memory problems, where they may not be able to remember their breakfasts, and near the end of their life, but people with those conditions may suddenly have a moment of lucidity, maybe even great lucidity. And so someone I'm thinking of just recently, when that was happening with a parent in a hospital, they were sitting there, maybe once an hour, they would suddenly come back, and they experienced it in the language of like the soul was leaving or had left. I forget the term you used. The soul is semi there, and they experienced it as a soul kind of coming back and like preparing them. They had, people have all kinds of ways. It's a special time, that transitional time.
Right.
They experienced it in that kind of.
Right.
One religious people wasn't a religious person, but he became religious. He became highly spiritualized kind of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Right. I will point out, and that's what you're saying, I believe, but that is that often the body actually becomes a prison for the soul. And because the body has its own desires, and the soul has its opposite desires. The body wants bodily things, and the soul wants soulful things. Now, when the body becomes weaker, the soul very often emerges in a more powerful way because it doesn't have the imprisonment of the body. You see that in those situations. I'll share with you a very quick anecdote, but yesterday, during services, in my congregation in Scottsdale, by the way, everyone is welcome, congregation of Tefillah, whenever you come golfing, you're more than welcome to join us. But we had a child who's autistic, and I went to speak to him during Kiddush, and then I walked into the banquet hall. By the way, we just built a beautiful building, and it's really magnificent. We walked into this banquet hall. I forgot to kiss the mezuzah. He says, Rabbi, I have to go kiss the mezuzah. He goes, kiss the mezuzah, and he says, to the mezuzah, he says, thank you, God. And I asked him, what did you just do? And it moved me. It gave me goosebumps. He said to me, this mezuzah, that's my microphone to God. It's my microphone to God. And I really believe that, you see that with autistic children also, that their soul really is so present, so alive. They have all these soulful ideas that are just so elevated. Yes, Melissa.
Can you talk a little more about the concept of a root soul and how the notion of how these different souls are within us and where those souls come from?
Right. That's very big. How much time do we have?
We have a lot of time, actually.
Okay, good. All right. So there is a concept. So they are. We say that the acronym for Israel, the name given Israel, the name given to the Jewish people, is Yesh Shishim Ribot Yot LaTorah, but that refer to 600,000 souls altogether. That we have there are 600 root units or root souls, like you called it. Then they came down for the first time, but most of them did not complete their mission, and therefore they have to come down again. But what comes down again is not necessarily the entire soul. It's just a part of the soul that didn't complete its mission. So then it's fragmented. And if only a part of that soul that completes its mission, then only that part will come back again. So from those root souls, you do have many different fragments. Now you also have the concept of this general idea that there is a part of the soul that remains up in heaven and almost serves as the GPS for the soul down on earth. That's why, by the way, the concept of Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov doesn't mean good luck. Mazel Tov really means, as explained in Kabbalah, good dripping. Mazel comes from the word nozel, good dripping. Because what we really wish upon one another is that our connection to our upper soul, right, to our deeper self, is so fluid that GPS drips flowingly. So you also have that concept. But again, only parts of the soul come back down. The root soul was only wholesome at its very creation and its very beginning of the mission here on earth. But since then it's been fragmented, yeah. Yes?
I have two questions that are unrelated to each other.
Sure. Before you begin, I have to tell you, our community is enthralled with you. Really, our book club has read your books many times, and thank you. Okay.
Well, I didn't even want to ask you. I heard we have extra time, so I thought I could indulge.
All right.
So about the letter from the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe that you referred to at the end of the packet about this man who had this problem with Shalom Bayit, and that makes it so that and the Rebbe tells him it's because you had this problem in your past life that now you're here to rectify. I'm like, well, why does he need to have had this problem in the past life? He's having it in this life, right? Like what's the necessity of creating this backstory? As we say, in fiction, why does he need backstory when it's happening here? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's my first question. My second question, which is not related, is it was amazing in reading the rabbi's book. This whole sort of geography of afterlife's not the right word, but this whole sort of process that you've described in your talk as well, which is in the book. And I hate to be the person who ruins the party here, but as many of us know, none of this is in the Torah, right? And so I guess my question is well, why isn't it in the Torah? I mean, we have and there isn't it's not there's no idea of something that happens after death in the Torah, because we have this idea of Sheol in the Torah, which is just sort of this idea that souls just go down to Sheol and that's kind of it. And so I guess what I'm curious about is, why aren't there better ideas of this, in the earlier texts? So those are two unrelated questions.
Right. So two excellent questions. I can only share with you what I can share with you. Maybe others have different answers to these questions. First of all, I think what the Rebbe was trying to do is just to give him a different perspective and therefore a tool on how to deal with these Shalom Bayit problems at home, maybe to empower him to deal with this problem because of different reasons that he may have not thought of.
It gives him one more reason, obviously he doesn't have adequate reason to address this problem right now, so we're giving him another motivation.
That's right. Yeah,
so
suppose
it's more like a tool.
Exactly. Maybe that's how dire Shalom Bayit issue was. So yes, I think so. Now, secondly, the second question, look, the classic answer is because Judaism focuses on living here in this world. We're not so much focused on living in the next world. In fact, the notion of doing things in this world for the next world is very selfish, right? Then I'm really worshiping God for my reward, for my paradise. So I'm not doing it for God, I'm doing it for myself. So because of that, I think that the Torah doesn't speak about it. The Torah is a guidebook for this world. Now, could it have, if I was God, could it have mentioned the afterlife? It would have helped. But again, I think the focus is on this world, on this life. It's about, b'chalta b'chaim, choose life.
Well, there is rewarded punishment in the Torah, but it's happening now, right? It's national.
Right.
Right. There's no absence of a rewarded punishment, but there is an absence of that kind of separate realm.
Right, but that shouldn't be my motive. Right. Amechaye and Meni, maybe you can shed light also. I know you rose your hands.
First of all, I'd like to, what Pinny says is right. The famous debate between Nachmanides in the 11th century, alleged debate between Nachmanides and Paolo Cristiani in Aragon. The argument about the essence of God, Christianity, and so on and so forth. They're going on. It's a beautiful argument. If you like to read it, it's outstanding debate. Probably never took place, but for the sake of the conversation, is a part there when the counterpart of the argument, Paolo Cristiani, was a former Jew, I know, we're not getting into that point, but the former Jew says, look, the reason you have to believe in Jesus Christ is because if you believe in Jesus Christ, you'll reach heaven. You'll reach heaven, then you can reach redemption and so on and so forth, and then you can be together again with the forefathers. So Moshe ben Nachmani, the Ramban stood up and said, listen, with all the respect to you, I don't care. The men don't care. I don't think the Rambam has any importance. As Rabbi Pinny said, really what's the important thing in this world. Now, that said, which I agree with him, the fact that Sheol is mentioned in Chumash Bereshit, mentioned once, that you will take my Sheola, again, is it referring really to the world to come, referring really to the next world? It's an expression that people use in that time, because there's really no expression of heaven and hell whatsoever. But again, it was not really important. The same thing as the concept of the same reason that the concept of Mashiach was not born, really, till the end of the destruction of the first temple, or second temple, depends how you read the prophets. But it's true, we adapting certain terms as we go. Tefillah, for example, that we spend most of the day today speaking in one way or another on prayer, or tefillah, or whatever it is, it's a new concept. Never happened before. We got to the 2nd century, we no longer have a temple, therefore we didn't have a choice. We created replacement. Now the world to come has to deal with the issue that everybody will deal with. I have a soul, and I don't want to let it go. So what happened to it? However, in the prophets, and especially in the book of Tehillim, the world to come does mention Mi Ale Bar Hashem. So it is more clear that there is a conversation in the prophet and the written about the world to come. But I agree. I think, as Rabbi Pinny said, you said, it really is a non-issue. The most important thing is this world. In one way or another, if we're not happy here, it's not going to happen. How many times you're going to come and have an issue with your wife? Listen, reincarnation, the 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time, it doesn't matter. You said the soul as Rabbi Pinny said, the soul, not just is part of 600,000 particles, it's also in each soul, there are 600,000 particles.
Yeah.
And each soul has a limit to how many commandments they have to do and how many sparks of divinity they have to fix. Imagine how many marriages you have to go through.
Just because Melissa said it, we have some time. So first of all, Jeff and wife, to remember the name, about reincarnation and resurrection and the combination of the two. There's an interesting question. What happens with reincarnations in the times of resurrection? If I've been to this world for 15 times, who will resurrect? Am I going to lose one of my personalities at that time? So it says that since each reincarnation rectifies one part of the soul, so at the time of resurrection, each body will be resurrected with that soul particle that he had corrected in that specific resurrection. So yes, marriage, connections, relationship will be retained at that time. At the times of resurrection, people will be reunited because these specific relationships happen with specific parts of the soul. Now, you were asking there about why do we need to give explanations for why do we have hardships in our marriage life? So I think the answer for that, my father always kept telling me that when you read the Rebbe's answers to different people, you see that the Rebbe answered people in the way they asked the questions. And the Rebbe could answer the same question in so many different ways because he tried to answer the petitioner, the person who wrote this question. So if you see the first sentence, you tell me you're giving the proper amount of tzedakah. I mean, a person who gives tzedakah in order to try and solve his marriage is most likely he's trying to avoid something. He's trying to run away. And I think the Rebbe brings him back and tells him, look, it's not just this spiritual concept, go try, give tzedakah. That's not the point. You have a mission, and you have to do it. You have to rectify it. Just giving tzedakah won't help. Go do something. And probably for this person, understanding that this is a continuation of something that he hadn't done in his previous life, probably was a way to, to inspire him and to inspire his motivation. Now, I think the questions you both asked about why don't we teach about resurrection and why don't we teach about reincarnation in so many schools, is the answer is your question. Because reincarnation and resurrection, many reincarnation, are not mentioned in the Torah, so some people just avoid that. And the same goes to mysticism and Kabbalah and Chassidut, that in some places are being avoided because they're not part of the, it's not what we have in the Bible, which is true. And the question, why don't we have them in the Bible? So that's a very old question. I forgot the name, but one of the Torah commentaries has, if I'm not mistaken, 9 answers to answer this question. How come Gan Eden and Gehinnom, heaven and hell, are not mentioned anywhere in the Torah? Even the Sheol, when mentioned in the Torah, is not necessarily speaking about afterlife or heaven or hell. It could be explained in different ways. And in the Torah, there is nothing about nothing about spirituality. It's all very physical. If you behave, you'll get rain. You won't get heaven. It doesn't mention. So there are different answers for that, but one of them is that Torah, and especially the 5 books of Torah, the 5 books of Moses, they are referring to everyone. And not everybody is ready and able to deal with spirituality. And I think this is especially true with the olden days. I think that with times, we all became more open to spirituality, and this is why, and Chassidut mentions it a lot, that some concepts, as my brother mentioned, develop with times because the time had come. This is the time to reveal a new concept because the world is ready for this concept. The revelation of Kabbalah, which is later, the revelation of Chassidut, which is much later in the Jewish history, is because this is the time to reveal. So I think today, avoiding this subject is a crime.
Yes. Thank you, Rabbi Meni. Thank you.
I have a question that I can't really grasp very well, but it relates to something I showed my friend Bobby, a new grandchild in my family. And she says, wow, it looks like Carol. It looks like her grandmother. And I think of my son, my eldest son, who's named for my father who passed long before he was born. And I see a personality that's very much attached to the feelings I had for my father. I was wondering if is that the soul? Is that the neshama? Is that the physical body? Is it something above?
What I can say is this, and that is that when parents name their children, and then also the books of Kabbalah speak about, they are endowed with the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, to come up with a name for that child. And that name, of course, matches the attributes of the soul. By the way, that's why if a person is sick, then we change a name or we add a name, because we want to ensure that the name that really is a reflection of those attributes or even empowers those attributes match. So there is no doubt a correlation between the name of a person and the attributes that it carries, that the soul carries. I'll tell you this, I'm named after my grandfather. My name's Pinchas, my grandfather. My father's father was Pinchas, and I've been told multiple times, endless times, that I'm exactly like him. Now, I do believe that, no doubt, that that name, especially with the intention of the person that we are named after, channels those qualities, those same qualities.
Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we name him because we see him, or do we see him because we name him?
Right, right. Yeah. Very good. Yes.
Many people may know this reference, but in terms of the average Jew's understanding of the issue of eternity, I'll refer to a Larry David show.
Go for it.
In
Go
which
your
he and
enthusiasm.
his married 10 years non-Jewish wife are going to reaffirm their vows.
Mm.
And so the night that they're going to do this, they decide to share what they're going to say when they get up on the pipah, when they're going to do this, so that they're not repeating what each other say. And his wife starts, and she says, well, I've been very lucky to have found somebody at this stage of my life, yada, 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 and that the two of us will be together for eternity. And so she notices that Larry gets a sick looking like on his face, like he's going to throw up. And she says, well, what's the problem, Larry? Did I say something wrong? He says, did you say for eternity? And she says, yeah, is there anything wrong with eternity? And he says, I thought it's still death to us. We don't believe it. It's just till death.
Very good. Excellent. Yes, Margie.
Can you talk about hell and Gehenna? And are either of these Jewish ideas of the popular notions of punishment in that way very different from being in the Kafasela?
Very different. I'm sorry.
Kafakela, than being in the slingshot. It's a very different idea.
Right. So hell. By the way, there's also what's called the Nar Dinur, or the river of fire, that bleaches the soul, like we spoke about, right, in Kafakela. Hell is that moment of shame, or that moment of pain, where I see my wrongs, like I said, and it hurts me. Now, sometimes the wrongs are so repetitive, or so intense, or so impactful that I have to stay in that moment for a long time. Not that there's any notion of time up there, but to use a notion that we can relate to. So the pain, therefore, is also stronger, longer, so to speak. But that's what really hell is. That's what Gehinom is. Kafakela, I think, refers to the stage itself. Gehinom refers to that pain and that shame.
Again, if I may, again, we need to remember that historically, we actually, if you read a text, earlier text, we didn't believe in the sin, hell, pitchfork, all the stuff that is mentioned in the Talmud, mentioned in other places. We didn't believe in it, but it was people, the metaphorical level, ability of people to express what they believe people going to go through, what the neshama going to go through, had to go through some refinement, and that's time. Time refined those terms. Kafakela was always Kafakela, but before that was hell. It's saying the same story about the Nachash, the snake in heaven, right? Snake in heaven seems such a morbid creature, right? You have a snake, big, tall, speaking, convincing you to do everything. What happened to him afterward? Where it happened to, he represents evil, right? He represents the essence, the core of evilness, of changing humanity to make a decision to go to do something evil. As years go by, his name changed and became Satan, Lucifer. I have a whole list of names, I think 27, 28 names of those. And eventually today, it can be ego, can be, can be selfishness. All those words are the same thing, which is take us time to create those metaphors, and they're changing as we are learning them. Saying about the description of the soul, we believe the soul always had 5 names. But as time went by, we started defining it better. As my brother mentioned, as the knowledge was expanding, we have no more tools to explain it. And the same thing about if you talk about what is hell. So the predecessor of the Simpson TV show was What is Life is Hell. That's what it is. It's really, we grow. We develop something new as years go by. But originally, yes, we had this in Judaism. We had this a part of whatever terminology you want to use. We had it. Again, as development, we became more civilized.
I'm confused by that, Rav Meni.
But what,
Because I
the
thought,
hell?
well, what you just answered, because my understanding of reward and punishment is not in this world, means that there is something that happens afterwards. That Sarva Onesh Tzadik Varalo, a good person and a bad person, sometimes don't get their just rewards in this world. So where's that next level?
So-
Is that next level to the neshama in some ways? Where is that?
I want to add to Lewis's question, because it's actually, I think, a fundamental point that Dara is also raising. There's the tension here is between the idea that there are eternal Jewish concepts that are embedded in Judaism from the beginning till now. And on the other side, there's the idea that ideas develop and change. And it's much more comforting to think about ideas being eternal, but when we look at history, we see that ideas do change. And I think that's what Lewis is also referring to. Can you help us understand how both can be true?
Well, Judaism, of course, everything is true. But I think, again, my opinion, but my basic notion is, my father bring it up in this book, bring also in the Third Plegros. We're assuming, we're believing that there's a soul. But there's something here, it's not only X amount of pounds of meat and X amount of water, something beyond us. Once we assume that, and we also took the first assumption that he's a God, we have a problem. Because we are so attached to our soul, we cannot define that this thing will then go away. This ego, this whatever you want to call it, the self, is inseparable. Therefore, when we define it, we had to start coming up with answers. Some of the answers are in the text. They are, if you read the original Jewish text, happens to be called the Bible, after a new commentary by Rabbi Steinsaltz coming out as we speak, there are 5 or 6 stories in the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, that are unexplainable without a spiritual explanation. They don't fit in. They don't make sense. They don't work out without another explanation. The sages already caught it up, probably 3rd century CE or BC, depends who you ask, and they said, look, those stories have a deeper meaning. And already about that moment, they decided that those things are spiritual, are Kabbalistic, are the secrets of Judaism. The most famous one is, of course, with Chava and the apple, fig, wheat, whatever it was. We are under no circumstance considered a creature. It was created by God, right? She's handmade, right? Man is just a word, but Chava is handmade. She's going to sin 6 hours after? It's impossible. The woman was perfect, right? The soul was unbelievable. Her soul was never tarnished like Adam's soul. She was perfect. And she will sin 6 hours later? Make no sense. That's one of the stories of Kabbalah come and explain it. Second story, immediately after that, the story about the cherubs. Sorry, the cherubs. Why do I need the cherubs there? It makes no sense. They're protecting. What are protecting? The 10 Gan Eden. That's the first time Gan Eden is mentioned. But it doesn't make sense. If it's a spiritual place, why do you need a guardian? If I need a guardian, why is it spiritual? It might as well have a physical guardian to a physical place. So when the sages had to do with it, that they allegedly discovered the entire world. Alexander the Great was the first one to do it, allegedly do it. He was looking for the gates of heaven. So the rabbis were at the time trying to put more and more layers of explanation what they felt, what tradition was transferred to them. Our tradition believe in oral tradition, and by that, there's a part of our tradition that only was written later. For example, all the story of Kabbalah that we have today, some of them are based on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writings, are written in 14th century, maybe 15th century. But there's a Kabbalistic tradition. The book of, what was mentioned earlier, Sefer Abahir, Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Megillat Otiyot, they are old books. How we know they're old? Because there are words in them that we don't have in Hebrew today. They're older books. They're 1st century, 2nd century CE. We know they're old. They had the tradition, spiritual tradition, from the beginning of time. The question is what was written. As we come to the end of, sorry to use it, the end of Jewish normal tradition, when we had a temple, sacrifice, everything was normal, so to speak, the rabbis started writing things down because they did not have a choice. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, they thought it was a disaster. The day that they written the translation of the Torah the first time, Septuagint, they had a Kriya, they had a fast day that was described for generation. The audacity of those 70 rabbis to come and translate the Bible, the Torah, to Greek was considered a crime. And they thought that would be the end of it. As time went by, those traditions become more permanent. But we can see, for example, they believe in Mashiach. Even though the Rambam does say that it's a principle of faith, many other scholars say no, it's not. The fact that it's not necessary to me to believe in Mashiach in order to be a Jew. If I'm a Jew, I'm already believe in Mashiach, but it's not a necessity. The really faith is in one thing, in God. However, I think that part of what we've been taught traditionally and orally, with generation to generation, they came through those things. And part of the thing we can talk about is reward and punishment. But the real reward and punishment is not the world to come what we're talking about. It's not the world to come after you pass. It's the world to come after the world of resurrection. It's the end of the world. And for that, all the mathematics of if you do this mitzvah, what is the value of it in the world to come? It's not when you go to heaven or hell, so to speak, the common knowledge. It's much later, when the reward and punishment is what we see. The end of days, as we call it. We call it Olam Haba. But again, I'm a strong believer that part of the text, part of the traditions, will change with time. All the midrashim about Mashiach are really being recreated immediately after the destruction of the temple. The story about Mashiach being born in the 9th of Av and so on and so forth, it's not mentioned in the Torah, it's mentioned in Midrash. We're all reciting it, but it's Midrash. And we have to remember that it's part of what we try to accommodate the nature around us, or try to accommodate what we have around us to make it available, accessible, and tangible to people. Part of the biggest problem with Judaism was that we don't have an image of anything. Right? We don't have an image of God. So what do? We have a problem, right? The Jews leave Egypt, they have a problem. They have a problem. They're not used to it. So part one, what they do, they create a golden calf. What's the second part they do? They're making cherubs. Jews knew that when they never saw the things, but theoretically they all knew that in the Holy of Holies is a given image of an angel. And for the common people who left Egypt, called the slaves left, that was good enough. In fact, they never saw the thing, it didn't matter. But it's part of the game, and we did both orally and so on. We transferred this tradition. Very obvious that we have this issue is the story of Moshe Rabbeinu faith. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who has a spiritual revelation. And the only thing we know about it is that he has an impact by seeing God. That's the only thing we know about it. But from there we can derive certain things. There's a spirituality, there's light, there's energy. And from there we develop as time goes by. And that's my humble opinion. Very humble. Very humble. Hebrews is something they don't ever have. Yes.
Can I bring the conversation back to the motivation of human behavior just for a minute, and the animal soul and the godly soul? Did I understand correctly that the godly soul is one that's at a higher level, a much higher level, and the animal soul is motivated in terms of motivation.
Generally speaking, of course. Yes, right.
So, but doesn't God want us to satisfy our own needs and be happy and feel good? I mean, isn't that, you can be behaving in a good way that satisfies your ego, but is also fulfilling what God wants of you truly to, while your soul is in a body, to actually enjoy the combination of the body-soul unit. So why is that not at a higher level?
So the truth is that it is in a higher level, and that self-fulfillment and self-enjoyment in what we're doing, in being observant, is actually a goal. The question is the point of motivation. Why do I do it? Why do I seek for self-fulfillment? Is that because I want to feel self-fulfilled, or because that's part of the godly plan? That God wants us not to be just robots who are doing specific actions in order to satisfy Him, but He wants us to be emotionally involved. So if I'm being emotionally involved and I'm being self-fulfilled, but this is all because I know that this is what God wants me to, that's very different than if my original intention is just to satisfy myself. Okay?
Isn't that hard to separate sometimes?
It's a steak and Shabbos.
It is.
What?
If I may.
A steak and Shabbos. A steak, a good steak. Right? And do the same. That during the week, when you eat a regular steak, it's for your physical fulfillment.
Right.
When you have a good steak in Shabbat, that's for godly divine. Just have to do with the intention. Shabbat, I'm eating because it's Shabbos meal. That's the entire purpose of the meal, even though I'm enjoying it as much, is based on my particular action, but it's all divine. If I eat the steak in Monday night, that's a bit more about my ego.
Even though I can eat steak Monday night and still
And not have it be a
do it
secret.
as part of God's will.
All right.
I would just sum up just to did anyone have another question here? And then maybe I'll, one more
I
question.
just wanted perhaps an example to make sure we understand what you're saying. So if I study the Torah, because I'm supposed to give 10% to charity, and I give 10% to charity because I think it's going to give me really blessings, and I'm going to be blessed in my life. That's okay, but that's part of the animal soul. If I can't stand giving charity because I'm cheap, and I know that I'm supposed to give 10% charity because Hashem wants me to do that, and I do it anyway, that's part of the heavenly soul. Is that correct?
That is when it's clear that it's coming from the godly soul.
Right.
But this is simple. You see,
I try to make it
the
simple.
trick is that I do it because I enjoy it, and I feel the importance of giving tzedakah, etc. And I still do it because God wants me to do that. As Gaya said, this is, first of all, it's very subtle, and also it's about intention and about what I think and what is my motivation. But we don't have to suffer. The point of being Jewish is not to do things that we don't like to. We're supposed to be liking all what we're doing. We're supposed to go to shul in the morning and dance and say, oh wow, I am going to pray now. I'm putting on tefillin. That's so exciting. But is the reason you're putting on tefillin is because it's exciting? Or you're excited because He wants you to be excited? That is godly soul.
All right, I want to wrap this up. After, unless Meni and Amechaye, you have anything else to say. But I do want to wrap this up because I do want to try, others spoke about a common thread between all themes. So try to find a common thread, successfully and unsuccessfully, you'll decide. But between the idea of reward and punishment, this idea of the nefesh haba'amit, that's self-oriented, selfish, and nefesh elokit, which is more selfless, and this idea of the afterlife also, or not the afterlife, we say we don't believe in afterlife, the world to come, or in the journey, the endless journey of the soul. I do want to sum it up maybe by quoting Viktor Frankl, who said that one should not ask what I want from life, but rather what life wants from us. And in a way, I think that's why the sages, do agree, most of them, on this idea that there is a reward of punishment, but the expression of that reward and punishment is different. And therefore you have the Mishnah, the famous Mishnah of the ethics of our fathers. It says, Chal mitzvah, mitzvah. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. The ideal state is a state in which I am so one with what life wants from me that it is in and of itself rewarding. That I feel that divinity, like we said before, flowing through me, that I'm elevated. I'm not doing it for me, but I'm doing it again as a conduit, and that conduit feels so satisfied simply by being a conduit. I do want, when you spoke about reward and punishment, the first thing that came to mind is actually, it's on video, you can YouTube it, but an interesting conversation between the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory and Rabbi Steinsaltz. And Rabbi Steinsaltz was going to receive $1, and the Rebbe asked him, so did you receive a reward yet for your work in this world? And Rabbi Steinsaltz asks with the astonishment, is there really a reward in this world? Right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And the Rebbe, what? Am I
just to clarify.
Yeah.
When my father suffered from different people, and so the Rebbe told him what it says in the ethics of
Right.
the fum
Tzara.
by the suffer,
Right.
as much as you suffer, you will gain, you will
Right.
be rewarded. And then the Rebbe asked him, so did you get that
reward yet?
for your suffering?
Right. And then your father responded, in this world?
And you said yes.
And the Rebbe said, of course, yes, in this world.
I'm still waiting.
But the way I view this interesting exchange, it's a fascinating exchange, and you can see it in many different ways. The way I view it is that I think the Rebbe saw Rabbi Steinsaltz as that conduit of God in this world, as that schar mitzvah, that he indeed is that perfect divine flow in this world, and therefore the Rebbe says, of course, I see you. I see the reward in and of itself. It didn't help him?
Helping me.
But I think that's what it is. And to put a practical side to it and wrap it up in this way, I will tell you that when I was in 11th grade studying at Mekor Chaim, the high school of Rabbi Steinsaltz, I already fell in love with Rabbi Steinsaltz from an early age, but my relationship was really deepening then. And we were a troubled class. You can ask Amechaye and Meni, they'll tell you. Torah, mitzvah, Rabbi Steinsaltz. Mekor Chaim didn't interest us too much. Other topics, soccer, and you can imagine what 11th graders think about. And they asked Rabbi Steinsaltz, they took out the big guns to come and speak to us. And Rabbi Steinsaltz came into the class. Rabbi Zinger, who's the head of the yeshiva, gave us a whole spiel as an introduction. It's Rabbi Steinsaltz is coming to set you straight and so on. And then Rabbi Steinsaltz comes in and he quoted 3 words. 3 words from Ezekiel 37, the valley of the dry bones, that vision that he had. And he came up to the podium, he looked at us very firmly and he said, Hatichyena ha'atzamot ha'ele? Will these bones, these dry bones, come alive? And he left the room. And it made such a big impact on me, and I think it did the trick because we did change a little bit after that. But I think the whole idea of learning about this endless journey of the soul, and sachar v'onish and so on and so forth, is really to ask ourselves, will these dry bones come alive? And if we can answer yes to this question, then no doubt we'll too become agents of God, His ambassadors of His light in this world. And that will reward us and reward all those that are around us. Thank you very much. We'll now take a short break. Everyone is invited to help themselves, and then we'll have the pleasure and privilege of hearing from Darrell Horn.